We the people. 3 words that might be the greatest con ever pulled in the history of Western civilization. People have them tattooed on their bodies, they wear them on t-shirts, they say them like they're reciting gospel. And that's exactly what the people who wrote them were counting on. That you'd be so mesmerized by the poetry of the phrase that you'd never stop to ask who the people actually were. They weren't you. They were never you. In the summer of 1787, 55 men, wealthy, land-owning, most of them slaveholders, locked themselves in a room in Philadelphia and decided they were going to rewrite the rules for an entire continent. Nobody elected them to do that. Nobody voted on it. Nobody even asked. They were dispatched to patch up the Articles of Confederation, and instead, they burned the whole thing down and started from scratch. And then, with a straight face, they wrote "We the People" at the top of the replacement document as if the people had been anywhere near that room. Newsflash, they hadn't. The doors were literally locked. Patrick Henry saw it immediately. At the Virginia Ratifying Convention, he stood up and asked the only question that mattered. Who authorized you to do this? Not "this needs work," not "the system is flawed." Who gave you the right to install a new government over everyone without asking anyone? He never got an answer. He wasn't supposed to get one. The answer would have collapsed the whole premise. And not even all of them bought it. 39 of the 55 signed. George Mason walked out without signing because he already knew what it was going to become. He said it quite plainly. This structure will produce either a monarchy or a corrupt aristocracy. That was 1787. Now look around. Take your time. Lysander Spooner, an abolitionist, legal theorist, and one of the few people in the 19th century willing to say the uncomfortable thing out loud, wrote a short book in 1867 called "No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority." His argument was so simple, it's almost insulting that it isn't taught in every civics class in America. A contract binds the people who sign it. That's it. That's the whole principle. You cannot sign a document that legally obligates people who weren't born yet, people who opposed it, or people who were never consulted. By the most basic standards of contract law, the very legal framework these founders operated within, the Constitution has no authority over you. You didn't sign it. Nobody currently alive signed it. It declared its own legitimacy and then dared anyone to argue with it. That's not law. That's a power grab with good penmanship. But here's what they really don't want you to think about. All of this, the whole magnificent theater of constitutional democracy, was staged on land that already had fully functioning civilizations on it. And not primitive ones. Not the savages your history books invented to make the theft feel cleaner. The Cherokee Nation had a written constitution, a bicameral legislature, and a functioning Supreme Court before Andrew Jackson decided the law didn't apply to him and marched them off their land at gunpoint. They had built, in other words, exactly what the founders claimed to be building, and it was destroyed precisely because it worked and couldn't be controlled. Cahokia, the great Mississippian city at the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, was home to tens of thousands of people at its peak, larger than London at the same moment in history. They had complex trade networks, sophisticated social organization, and urban planning. This wasn't a campsite. This was a civilization operating centuries before a single European boot touched this continent. The Tlingit peoples of the Pacific Northwest had legal and economic systems so sophisticated that European legal theorists would have recognized the architecture. They had formal dispute resolution, defined property relationships, and governance structures built on accountability and reciprocity. None of it required a king. None of it required a constitution written in secret by men who owned other human beings. These weren't replaced because they failed. Let's be absolutely clear about that. They were destroyed because they couldn't be owned, couldn't be taxed, and couldn't be made to produce profit for people an ocean away. The governance structures that replaced them weren't superior. They were just more convenient for the people doing the replacing. So when someone tells you the Constitution is sacred, when they tell you to trust the process, when they tell you that working within the system is the only legitimate path to change, understand what they're actually saying. They're telling you to keep trusting a document that declared its own authority, written by men who had none, installed over people who were never asked, on land that was never theirs. Patrick Henry asked the question in 1787, and nobody answered it. So I'll ask it again now, and I want you to sit with it because it doesn't have a comfortable answer. If they had no authority to begin with, what exactly are you obeying?